Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today I am up early because there are a ton of NBA trade rumors flying around, and I decided to cover every single major one in a single video today. But really quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day. Okay, so I was asleep, looked at my phone this morning, and decided, I need to go ahead and get up. I need to get a video out because there are a lot of things happening as we are now on Tuesday of trade deadline week, just less than 72 hours away from the trade deadline on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to begin by talking about a handful of rumors around the league. The first one being the one that really got me up out of bed this morning because it was just completely out of nowhere. So here's what Woj had to say this morning, 6 hours ago as of the recording of this video. Detroit and Phoenix are discussing a deal centered around Luke Kennard, and a possible package gaining traction for Kennard is Jevon Carter, Kobo, and a first round pick. And this one got me excited because it's a different name. Like, we knew that Luke Kennard potentially could be in play because he hasn't really played that much this season. He's a good player, but maybe someone that the Pistons would be willing to part with. And they said they definitely need assets moving forward. And Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond are probably going to be moved at some point as well. So it looks like a complete teardown in Detroit. However, when I talked about Detroit's situation and what they should do moving forward, I basically made the case that Kennard should be one of only a few players on this Pistons roster that is untouchable to a certain extent, and then he should be a guy that they should keep and attempt to build around, but they obviously have different ideas. Now, the idea of trading Kennard isn't necessarily a bad one. It's about the compensation you're getting in return, which is the main conversation to have here, right? Because you're getting Jevon Carter and Kobo, two backup guards that could end up being something down the road. They're both still relatively young, although Carter is a little bit older than you would expect from I believe, second-year player at this point. But the most important part of this package is the first-round pick, because obviously Phoenix would be making this move not only because Kennard is young and can be part of a core moving forward, but also because they want to try and make the postseason this year. So are they willing to make that first-round pick potentially either unprotected or top 5 protected at most? Because for Detroit, that's where most of the value comes in here, because if, let's just say, the Suns do miss the playoffs and they end up with another lottery pick, that's a huge deal for Detroit, and at that point, the compensation becomes worth it in exchange for a player in Kennard that is good, however, might not be better than someone you would get in the draft a couple of years from now, and he's already a few years into his deal, so you have to pay him in 2 seasons. So that is kind of the mindset here, right? Detroit's trying to get any kind of value they can out of their current roster because they're finally recognizing that things aren't going well for them at all. And then the other side, the Suns are trying to make a move not only that solidifies another player as part of their young core, but also helps them potentially push for the postseason this year with Kennard's floor spacing. So this is a really interesting rumor. It seems relatively concrete because there's so many specifics here, and this seems like one of those, as do a lot of these rumors, where a team is in pretty heavy talks with another team about a player, and they want it to be known across the league what the trade package is. So if a team sees this and was like, oh, it's only Carter, Kobo, and a first for Kennard, oh, we can beat that. That's what it sounds like right now. It's the Suns, or the Pistons are trying to let other team knows, hey, Luke Kennard's available. This is the price that we're looking at. We're probably going to accept unless someone comes up with a better deal. And so maybe we'll see him going to a different team. But right now, it seems like Kennard could be on the move to Phoenix. Moving on now is one that I kind of covered in yesterday's video, talking specifically about Clint Capela. But this scenario specifically is something that I didn't talk about, nor did I really anticipate. So Kevin O'Connor tweeted, this is part of a larger article, said sources, a three-way deal, was discussed to send Robert Covington to Houston, Clint Capela to Atlanta, and picks to Minnesota. The Wolves hope to flip assets for D'Angelo Russell, but Golden State denied their offer. Talks have stalled. So we talked about the Clint Capela thing yesterday. It's probably going to be an Eastern Conference team if they can help it, if they can find a way to make a move. And in this scenario, it would be Capela to Atlanta to, I guess, be their 5 of the future, Covington to Houston to help them on the perimeter, which would be a huge help for the Rockets, and then multiple picks to Minnesota, whether it be picks from Houston or Atlanta or both. Now, the other interesting wrinkle to this is the fact that D'Angelo Russell, of course, is involved, because we're talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves, and D'Angelo Russell is almost always involved. So there are a lot of layers to this. Let's first talk about this for Atlanta, because I think it's interesting that they're going so heavily, it seems like, after Clint Capela and after 5s in general. Earlier in the season, there were a lot of Andre Drummond rumors around Atlanta, and now it's all about Clint Capela. And the question is, where does that leave John Collins, because reportedly they're interested in moving him simply because they don't want to pay him in 2 years, which is a similar reason for why they traded Taurean Prince over the offseason. They didn't want to sign him to an extension. And I tweeted this yesterday, and I get the idea to an extent of keeping your payroll low while you're still developing your players. But if you continue to turn over those players before signing them to an extension, then you're never really going to be any good. So that's an interesting strategy for them, but I would imagine that if they get Capela, then Collins will probably be somewhere else as well. The Covington Capela thing in terms of the Rockets is pretty simple. They want to get the perimeter player. They want to trade away Capela in exchange for perimeter help, as well as, a replacement level center. And in this scenario, maybe there is a replacement level center that isn't involved here that we're just not aware of because it's such a specific detail, or they're just banking on their ability to sign one as a free agent and develop them, or as a buyout player, potentially someone like Tristan Thompson down the road if he doesn't get moved as a buyout candidate. And then we get to the D'Angelo Russell aspect of this, because there have been a ton of D'Angelo Russell rumors over the last couple of days. First, it was reported, as it has kind of seemed like this entire season, the Warriors want to see what D'Lo and Steph look like together before they trade him. They don't just want to trade him before they see what he actually looks like with most of their entire team. Obviously, it's not feasible to see him with Clay, but they'd hoped coming into this year to see Steph and D'Lo together, see what that looks like, and then explore trade in the offseason. They haven't gotten that opportunity. So teams are really pushing hard to trade for D'Lo, including teams like the New York Knicks, which was another rumored team, but mostly it seems like talks are revolving around Minnesota, but it just seems like Golden State really doesn't want to make this move. The other interesting thing to keep in mind here, specifically as it relates to the Ringer, to Kevin O'Connor, and to the Houston Rockets, Daryl Morey is very, very connected within the media. He has a lot of friends specifically at the Ringer, so I'm not putting as much stock into this specific rumor. Not that Daryl Morey is necessarily lying, but I think that maybe he could be not necessarily leaking this, but telling some of his sources in the media, hey, this is a deal that's discussed, as a way to kind of drive up interest and say, hey guys, like let's get something going. Clint Capela is definitely available. Similar to the first thing that we talked about, the first tweet, letting people know, hey, this is the price. If you want Clint Capela, jump in on this and we're ready to make a deal. That's always something to keep in mind when you're hearing about Rockets rumors, specifically the Ringer, or just in the media in general. Daryl Morey is very, very connected and has a lot of friends. Last point that I will make about this deal before we move on, the Clint Capela stuff continues to get more interesting, and the Boston Celtics were mentioned specifically as a team via Woj yesterday as a team that could be involved with Capela. That was speculation at that point, but he specifically mentioned them as a team that could potentially be involved. All right, moving on now to an extent here. We're still going to be talking about Robert Covington, but in a different way, because there were multiple rumors going around yesterday and the day before about potential compensation for the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for Covington. And it's very clear that the Warriors are just not interested in a Covington for D'Lo swap plus assets. They want other things, and in this case, it seems like Minnesota wants to try and get them draft picks rather than just straight up trading them Covington. And so they've been searching either 2 first-round picks for Covington, which is pretty high of an asking price, or a player and a pick. They even asked for Matisse Thybulle and a first-round pick from Philadelphia, and they said no. So it seems like Minnesota is really committed to trading Covington, but their asking price is just way too high. I would be very surprised at this point, considering the amount of rumors he's been in. I'd be very surprised if he is still with Minnesota by Thursday. But I would also be very surprised if they're getting 2 first-round picks or a player and a pick for him. Very good player, but quickly becoming one of the most overvalued players around the league by just fans and media members in general, it seems like to me. So again, keeping an eye on the Covington situation. And then the last big rumor we're going to talk about here is Andre Iguodala, and it seems as though Memphis is still committed to finding a trade for him. And this, honestly, if he doesn't get moved, this will probably deserve its own video. In general, the whole situation, the fact that he doesn't want to play for them, he's getting a lot more heat for that now. I'm not necessarily jumping on that bandwagon, but kind of echoing some of the other points that people have made. He wants to play for a championship contender, which is, that's understandable. Like, veterans at his age, definitely that's what they want to do, right? And he's been used to competing for championships for the last handful of seasons. But I mean, the Warriors traded him away, right? They saw him as someone that it was okay for them to trade, and I don't really understand why suddenly he thinks it's okay to just not play for a team that isn't even tanking, by the way, a team that's actually good and fun to play for. But that's beside the point, and will probably deserve its own video at some point, whether it's before or after the deadline. But for Iggy specifically, it still appears as though they want a first-round pick. Teams like Dallas have their backup offers in and ready, and Memphis is just kind of sitting around waiting to kind of see, what they can get out of teams as they get closer to the deadline. But at the end of the day, I would definitely expect him to be moved, even if it's just for a kind of okay young player and a second-round pick. They're going to move him to try and get something out of him. That's the whole point of having him around, rather than just buying him out much earlier, which they could have done. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Like I said, I wanted to get up early. I wanted to go and crank this video out and cover all the rumors that are going on right now. Hopefully nothing crazy has happened by the time I put this out, and I'll have a chance to cover it tomorrow. But regardless, this has already been a much more fun trade deadline week than maybe it seemed like it would be for most of the year, because there are definitely some bigger names being thrown around, and I'm ready to see what's going on with all these guys. But like I said, my name is Tucker. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will see you all next time.